I will point out one special power of Mjolnir that I've never seen in a modern adaptation, which is it can bring goats back to life. Hi, I'm Dr. Jackson Crawford. I'm a specialist in Old Norse language and mythology, and today I'm reacting to God of War Ragnarok.
Atreus!
So Loki is canonically a shapeshifter, but he is a voluntary shapeshifter. We see him take all kinds of different forms, but always deliberately. That includes human and animal forms. The interesting thing about this is that there are other people who involuntarily take bear shapes. We have Loki kind of taking on a characteristic that's not otherwise associated with him, but that is there in the mythology. So for example, there's the saga of Rolf Kraki, which includes a thread about this guy named Bodvar, whose father is a bear in the daytime and a man at nighttime. But Bodvar, at the end of his own life, also turns into a bear. And then there's this this notion in Norse literature of the fylgja. The fylgja is an animal that kind of represents a person's personality and may appear either to that person or to other people when that person is in danger. And tough, aggressive men, often their fylgja is a bear. There's a couple things here that I guess strike chords in my mind. Are definitely there in the original literature, but not in association with Loki.
There was a bear charging, and I charged back.
These stories don't have any kind of built-in FAQ that tells us why or how or the background of anything with the characters, right? We don't have stories of it's just thinking about, you know, in Indiana Jones of the Last Crusade, where it starts off the first 15 minutes or so, we see like how Indiana Jones became Indiana Jones, like why he has the hat and why he has the scar and all that stuff. We really don't get anything like that in Norse myth, right? The gods are adults and they're kind of always adults. And there's no reflection anywhere about, you know, when so-and-so was young or how so-and-so learned to do something. And in fact, the only thing that occurs to me that even suggests that Loki isn't always in control of the shape-shifting is the one story in which he becomes a mare and actually is impregnated by a stallion and does carry the pregnancy to term and gives birth to a foal. So it implies, I suppose, that maybe he got stuck in mare form. So Loki is really associated with wolves. That's not a nonsensical thing. I can't think of a time when he turns into a wolf. The words that are used about wolves and monsters and evil figures often get applied really kind of liberally, so that someone called a wolf might not be literally a wolf, but just somehow otherwise monstrous in personality or form. And so actually him turning into a wolf, while it doesn't specifically happen anywhere, it makes perfect sense to me, thematically.
Now, what you did to his boys. Self-defense. Dying is what we Aesir live for.
I think that the way that Odin and Thor look is kind of cool, right? And I like that they've really gone their own way here and not tried to just do another spin on like the Marvel universe. You know, we've talked before about so-called Potbelly Thor, Fat Thor. You know, he looks more like a powerlifter, and that seems fine. It's an interesting different take. You know, we don't otherwise have a ton of description of Thor other than he's red-haired, red-bearded, and big. Of course, the Norse word in context here, mikil, could imply all kinds of things from strong to large. Odin, they've also really gone in their own different way with. Like I think I said last time, I don't think I've ever seen a bald Odin before, and I don't think there's anything in the sources that contradicts that notion. He is supposed to be an old man with a gray beard. Something about the baldness, I think, gives him just a little bit more of a modern look, right? Rather than the long sort of medieval style here that we often associate with his gods. And I think there's something kind of appropriate to that about Odin. He's such a timeless figure in the way that he's obsessed with the future. It seems okay to me to kind of take him out of what looks more medieval. Of course, Odin is missing one eye. We never know what eye based on the original sources, so they've chosen right. That's fine. There's no reason to quibble about that. But as a bird person, I'm going to slightly quibble with his birds because they should be ravens, and what I see and hear there are crows. And there is a difference, so that's going to be my little quibble for this section.
Seek no quarrel with me, and I'll have none with you. Of course, it means that one has to stop his search for Tyr.
Odin is obsessed with knowledge, but a lot of the reason for that to prevent his own death at Ragnarok. He knows, thanks to prophecy, that he is going to be swallowed by the wolf Fenrir at Ragnarok, and that the other god's going to die too. And he is trying to find some way to forestall that or prevent it. And in his obsessive quest for knowledge, he is willing to sacrifice other people and himself. Example, lost his eye because he gave it up in the well of Mimir. So he's a very shifty, selfish presence in the stories. You know, he's a talker where Thor is a doer, and something about the way that he carries on with this kind of, you know, business lunch opening at this first meeting with him in the video game here actually kind of strikes me as realistic to him, right? He strikes me as somebody who's going to try to get things done with words. He is a god strongly associated with poetry and is not himself a fighter.
About time.
I think that Mjolnir is depicted pretty well. It's the shape resembles many of the Viking Age amulets of Thor's hammer. Its name probably is related to an otherwise lost word for lightning in Old Norse. So depicting it as sort of glowing with lightning seems fine, although it's never described that way in the sources. One neat thing about Mjolnir in the original sources is Thor can basically kind of call it up. Right, it can shrink to the size of a little amulet that he can wear, but it comes back to him when he's thrown it. So him kind of summoning it up in the scene where he's about to fling it at the main character seems, you know, not to do any injustice to the source material. Thor doesn't ever fly. In Norse myth, if you fly, you have wings, or you ride a flying horse, which I guess doesn't necessarily have wings. For example, the only gods or goddesses I can think of flying actually put on this thing called the falcon skin or feather suit, which either turns them into a falcon or otherwise provides them with the wings of a falcon that lets them fly. But no, Thor doesn't ever fly, and nothing is ever said about him jumping particularly far. However, I will point out one special power of Mjolnir that I've never seen in a modern adaptation, which is it can bring goats back to life.
Oh no. I say when we're done.
Be on the lookout for that one. I'm still waiting for that to come out in some modern movie.
What is this, lad? Where are we?
Somewhere only giants were meant to see.
Let me give a little bit of context about Groa. There is a figure named Groa who does have some association with prophecy. Groa, she is the wife of a lost or dead husband, as this scene sort of implies. But the person she actually interacts with in the poem Grogaldr is her son, who comes to her and seeks her magical protection as he goes on his own quest. And his quest may be to avenge the dad or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. But that's where the name Groa comes from. So it is certainly a witch or Cirrus-like figure. The prophecy of Ragnarok is not attributed to Groa. You know, reasonable poetic license to take a named Cirrus or witch and make it hers. As to the specifics of the prophecy that they're seeing here, so there is a wolf named Hati and a wolf named Skoll, who are supposed to be sons of Fenrir. Hati follows the moon and Skoll follows the sun. Although these names are only specified in the Prose Edda, that's kind of it that we hear about them. They will swallow the respective celestial bodies at Ragnarok. Once again, watching something from this game, I get driven to distraction by the runes. I know this is a tiresome point for me to make, but the alphabet is so mismatched to the language that it's writing that it's like seeing LOL WTF in Gothic writing from the Middle Ages. And it's not even done by someone who knows what runes to use if you were going to use that alphabet. So it just annoys me. Why do this stuff if you're not going to do it right? So I'm always going to be annoyed by language and rune stuff though.
You seek what all who search for us seek, to know the ending to your story.
The Norns are three female beings who are somehow associated with determining fate. They have a very shadowy presence in Norse mythology. They're not really speaking figures, but rather someone has died because that was the judgment of the Norns. They're very shadowy and in the background. There's no reason to think that they are inhuman looking, as these Norns kind of are. There's something, I can't quite place what they're trying to do with their faces, but they don't quite look human. So Urther is the one who's usually mentioned, and her name, if you want to be literal about it, would mean something like what has happened. So it may seem a little bit strange that a figure who's associated with someone's fate has a name that sounds a little bit like the past. But perhaps there's a concept a little bit like karma behind this, right? What has happened determines what can happen or what is like due to happen. But then the other one named Skuld, her name is actually exactly cognate with the English word should. So you could consider her perhaps, again, this is never stated, but perhaps she's monitoring what's obliged to happen or what one has obliged oneself to do. Of course, a lot of modern interpreters take her as the future, which seems to be kind of what's going on in this game, where she like knows what someone's about to say before they say it.
But you called him the destroyer of fate. There must be a way to subvert destiny.
There is no destiny, Pop.
And then Verðandi means becoming or happening. So again, loosely you can kind of see their names as like past, present, future, but it's never laid out that they have roles exactly that are related to that. And we get no sense of their personality because again, they're not like speaking characters who interact with anybody else. I guess I would just say that it is nice to see that they are not weaving, because I get sick of seeing the Norns depicted as weaving because it's influenced by the Greek fates, and the Norse Norns don't do that. So that's actually a Celtic mythical animal, not ever mentioned in Norse sources. You know, if they want to bring in some Celtic stuff, okay, but you're not going to find Kelpies anywhere in Norse stuff. There's not much that we can say about his appearance because it's never described, although I will point out that in the last stanza of the prophecy Völuspá in the Poetic Edda, feathers are mentioned, so he may have feathered wings. Actually, what got my attention in this clip and the next clip is that there's spoken Old Norse in this game, and it is like Yoki ere los sandwiches level Old Norse. Right, I mean, someone has taken a dictionary and looked up words but did not know how to use them, and I can't always tell what they're supposed to be saying. So like Freya here says openbera.
Openbera.
That would mean like to make public. I think it's probably intended to be like open up, but that's not what it would mean, and it's not the form of the verb you'd use. And then she says when she cuts off its head with some kind of magical effect, she shouts Lassa Riba, which is lock, rip. I don't know what that's also supposed to mean. Again, the verb forms are not what they would be in a command. I'm a language guy. So probably what they want to say is lock or close the rip. Okay, but what she says is to lock, right, like to lock a door, and to rip, like to rip a sheet of paper. So it's not it's not right. Like I said, it's Yokiere Los Sandwiches level Old Norse, so that's unfortunate. And I am a language guy, so I'm going to fixate on that kind of thing. Also, for the record, although he's beheaded here, he is the evil being who definitively survives Ragnarok, because the very last stanza of Völuspá, again, the prophecy of Ragnarok, this in the Poetic Edda, says that after Ragnarok, the witch sees Nidhogg flying over the valley with corpses in his wings. So clearly he does not have his canonical ending here, because it looks like he dies in the game.
All right, let's start with the lock not near its teeth.
We just don't know very much about him. Snorri describes him as a dog, as a domestic dog, as opposed to Fenrir being a wolf. Certainly, he's depicted kind of like that here. He looks more doggish than wolfish to me. As to the soul in the dagger, people are sometimes surprised by how little talk there is in Old Norse about souls, spirits, things like that. In fact, it's hard to find a word in Old Norse that's an easy equivalent to English soul or spirit. Notion of something's soul being in an inanimate object is a little foreign to Old Norse myth to me, although not to neighboring Finnish myth maybe. Although maybe in some way they're trying to kind of connect back to this notion that Fenrir and Garm are kind of the same thing. Man, can you imagine how much money you could make on Etsy if you could put people's dead pets' spirits into stuff? Here's a toothpick with muffins in it.
So, what part of the enormous wall made you think, oh, visitors must be welcome?
All right, so there's stuff to like here and stuff to quibble with, which is perhaps the headline for this entire discussion. So one thing that I like to start with is this portrayal of the wall as just an immense mountainous wall, right? That's a cool, different touch that I've never seen done before. It's not, necessarily obvious what the wall is supposed to look like in our original sources, but the notion that it's high enough to keep all of the Jotnar, anti-gods or giants, whatever term you prefer, out. I guess I had always kind of pictured something that looks more constructed, but this mountain wall appears to my mountain sensibilities. So that's cool. I see that Heimdall is depicted as being really pale, like kind of bleach pale. I'm sure that's inspired by this remark about Heimdall that we get in the Poetic Edda, that he is the, quote, whitest of the gods. A lot of ink has been spilled on what that means. I think that it's probably intended to imply that he's the most beautiful of the gods. Words for like shining or bright tend to be associated with beauty, but, taking him as very, very pale, I guess that works too. His horse, although we don't know anything else about it, is said to be Gulltoppr, and I see that in the game he has a lion ram chimera thing that's named Gulltoppr. Okay, I mean, I'm not sure they even know what lions or tigers are. But, I would definitely picture just a horse. We don't get any picture in our surviving sources of like the layout of Asgard, the realm of the gods. We don't have a sense of, what is next to what and where you would walk to do this and where you'd walk to do that. So plenty of poetic licenses available there, and that's all fine. Little detail that I kind of like how they did is actually treating Odin as one-eyed and having physical repercussions, right? Like you can't always see who's talking to him. Okay, that's clever. Like actually making it something that has consequences is neat. So again, yeah, good things and quibbles. And so the thing is, there's all these little things they do where I say, I like that they go in their own direction with, right? I'm sure I can get some heat about this, but I do like that they go in their own direction about what Thor looks like, what Odin looks like, right? Like that's neat. I like some of the little details, like, again, the raven shoulder detail on Odin. That's a neat little detail. I worked on Assassin's Creed Valhalla, right? I know that like 1,000 people worked on that game. So you'll have one person who's really, really concerned with getting things, very consistent, or at least having like a consistent explanation for why it's not the same. And then you'll have people who are just like, whatever, just throw in whatever just seems right. So surely some of it could be that. Different people have different attitudes. I really wish they had handled the language more responsibly. Like even just doing it consistently as like good modern Icelandic or good modern Swedish or something would have made it not raise my hackles the same way. I guess the way that they've really given their own visual signature to this story, I think is impressive, right? I will say that. I think that you can look at the characters in this game, the settings in this game, and say, this is its own interpretation that's not unduly in debt to any other interpretation. Right? This isn't just another spin-off that's kind of like half based on the Marvel interpretation. It's its own thing, and I do like that, and I do respect a lot of the artistic originality.
For more God of War, make sure to watch our review or another video of Jackson Crawford reacting to Ragnarok.